Hi everyone, it's Marla. Welcome back to Light and Liberty. Today we're going to take a look at the astrology chart for Vice President and presidential nominee Kamala Harris and see what we can find out about her from her chart. Now I have posted a astrology reading for Donald Trump quite a while ago. I did a reading back in the beginning of 2020 in which I talked about some downloads that I had received about who Donald Trump was in a past life. And so my reading back then focused on what it showed in the chart about him being this person and how it's affecting his situation with the United States today. So I will link that reading below if you're interested. You do need to have an open mind and, be willing to consider the possibility of past lives to really enjoy that reading. But I do hope to get another reading done for Donald Trump that's more similar to this one that I'm going to be doing for Kamala so we can get a little bit more of his personality now. And I'd love to do the vice presidential nominees as well, and also Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So, I had wished that I had done that a while ago. I've just been so busy. And this time has gone so fast that suddenly it's like we're 2 months away from the election, and I can't even believe that it's coming up that quickly. So even though RFK has stepped down from being a presidential candidate, I do feel like his role with the United States is definitely not over. And hopefully we'll see him running again at a later date. So let's take a look at Kamala's chart. Now, I am an evolutionary astrologer, so I'm interested in the soul's journey. And in that regard, I do focus a lot on possible past life scenarios for people. We're not going to go in depth with Kamala, but we are going to talk about some of this karmic energy or situations that maybe aren't resolved from other lifetimes and how it's affecting her journey today. I'm also very intuitive when I read astrology, so really my information comes from my intuition first and worrying about astrology rules second. So take that for what you will. And I always start my readings by looking at the nodes of the moon. So these are calculated points that represent where the moon crosses the ecliptic of the sun. And because of that, they're considered to be very karmic. And on one hand, we have the south node, which for Kamala is at 24 degrees of Sagittarius. And the south node gives us information about those past lives or earlier in this lifetime, kind of pattern, beliefs, challenges, but also successes. Things that you might have integrated in other lifetimes, like lessons that you've achieved and things that you've earned. And you continue with that energy as you go through your soul's journey. But often there are things that have to be cleared and released in order to fully embody those positive experiences that we've had in the past. Now couple that with the North Node, which is at 24 degrees of Gemini. And this is where our soul's growth is. So we want to find that balance between doing the healing so that we can gather our dharma and then growing into new areas of our life, expanding ourselves. So the first thing that stands out about her chart is that her north node of the moon is on her ascendant. And it's a very tight conjunction. They're both at the 24th degree of Gemini. So for Kamala, life is very fated. This may even be because she's received some kind of good karma from the past, or it could be because Her soul is really directing her life. So for her, she's probably often at the right place at the right time. Things may just kind of happen to her. She may be thrust in the spotlight whether she likes it or not. And people from the past, when I say past, I'm talking about past lives, come in and help her, support her in some way. We can see that her rise from vice president to presidential nominee was kind of like that, right? She was just kind of thrust into that role. Yes, she was the vice president, but at the beginning of the year, it was assumed that Joe Biden was going to be the candidate. And yet, things suddenly changed. There were people in the background that were supporting her, and they're the ones that kind of suddenly thrust her into this nomination and the spotlight. When I consider the energy of her chart, the repeating pattern that I see is that she's dealing with belief structures. She's got a strong Sagittarian ninth house Jupiter signature in her chart. And I feel like the biggest issue for her, or the biggest issue with that energy, is that she's struggled with beliefs or philosophies in other lifetimes. And there's something about that she needs to expand. She needs to do some clearing so that she can grow. I feel like she's got some beliefs that her soul is wanting to shed. Maybe these are beliefs that are not in her best interest. And so there's a lot of lessons around that. And we're going to get into that more deeply in a moment. But the second theme, I think, very much goes along with this, and that she's trying to find her independence. She's trying to find her truth. And the karma that she's coming in with is that she's very much influenced by other people. So another lesson I would say for her soul is shrugging off other people's advice, other people's opinions, and doing her own thing. Her south node is in her seventh house of relationships. So in the past, this is telling us relationships were important. And this carried over. It's not just from past lives, but in this lifetime, relationships are also important. People show up in her life to bring her lessons so that she can see how they're influencing her, to test her, and to see how she's going to handle that. Is she going to allow other people to make the decisions, control her, tell her what she has to say, tell her who she is? Or is she going to find that inner strength to be 100% authentic? And that's where her north node is leading her. Her north node is in the first house, which is the house of Aries. And this is all about finding her own will and becoming self-actualized and not worrying about what other people think. So the lesson here, I feel, is around truth. As I said, what is her truth? And how much is she being influenced by other people? The Sagittarian energy puts the focus on, what do I believe? What is my philosophy? What are my morals? And we take our knowledge and we develop that into some kind of moral structure for ourselves, some kind of life philosophy. So, coming in from a past life, her beliefs and her philosophies were having a very strong influence. There's a good chance that in other lifetimes she was very rigid in her beliefs. And that's a trap that a lot of people fall into. We experience circumstances in other lifetimes where we develop a belief structure that's relevant to that lifetime. And then we don't want to change those belief structures. And we go on and we live a different life and we're still trying to follow those belief structures even though they don't fit that life anymore or they're not right for us. So yeah, I feel that Kamala has to look at belief systems and she's breaking through old patterns and needing to develop or update her belief systems so that she can move on to new lessons. Another aspect of this that plays into the being influenced by other people is the energy of groups, which I also feel is very strong. She has her moon in the 11th house and her sun in the 5th house. She was born at a full moon, almost exact full moon. So her sun and moon are opposite each other. Her moon is in the sign of Aries, which goes with the needing to find herself and be true to herself. Her sun is in Libra, which is creating balance within relationships. So we can see how that's another pattern that's playing out here. And yeah, her moon is in the 11th house of Aquarius. And that's the group energy. So she wants to be accepted. Our moon is our emotional self, our subconscious mind, how we nurture and how we receive nurturing. And I feel that Kamala didn't receive the nurturing that she needed both in other lifetimes, but also there's definitely something that was going on for her in her childhood where I don't think she really felt nurtured. So she's really looking for acceptance. Even though she has these people that come out and support her and like move her along in her career, or maybe it's because of that. I feel she has doubts about herself and doubts about whether people really believe in her or not. So with her moon there, yeah, she's wanting to belong. She wants to have a sense of community about her. And I feel like that inspires her as well to help other people find some sort of community. So yeah, as I said, her south node is in Libra. Has a lot to do with justice as well. A lot of people that are attorneys have strong Libran or 7th house aspects in their chart. Libra, of course, is the scales, so it's justice, balance, harmony. So yeah, there's also this part of her that wants harmony with other people. A lot of times people that have strong Libra, they don't like to have conflict with other people. So her sun is where she's going to shine in life, and that is in relationships. But subconsciously, the moon energy is playing out of her needing, her knowing on a soul level that her truth involves finding herself and being true to her beliefs. Now, her sun is in the 5th house of Leo, and this can give her a lot of creative abilities, or I should say, like, where she's going to shine in life is in her creative abilities. But the thing with Leo is it's about our individuality. And if we're too heavily influenced by other people, then we're not really expressing our own creativity. We're following other people's maps, if you will, about what creativity should be. So in our 5th house, we don't want to be influenced by other people. We want to be able to express ourselves. But again, subconsciously with the moon in the 11th house, being accepted, how she's being viewed, being able to, in her mind, bring people together is a strong influence. So you're seeing how there's a little bit of tension here in the way that her sun and moon are set up. And when the sun and the moon are in an opposition or they're in square to each other, then it often represents that what we want and what we need is in conflict inside of ourselves. But because they're she has a lot of really needing to balance, is what we're seeing. Her chart is pushing her to balance between herself and others and being true to what her own inspiration is, as opposed to falling in line and just regurgitating someone else's ideas. And I think this is the conflict that she finds herself in this moment. So here's what I feel when I listen to Kamala Harris speak or when she's interviewed. I'm an empath, and I'm sure some of you out there are empaths as well. So I can I feel people's energy rather than always just going by their words. And I always feel like something's off there. For one thing, when I just listen to the tone of her voice, I get a funny feeling in my throat because I don't feel that I'm going to say being honest. My intention with this reading is not to just put my views about who I think she is here, but to try to be a bit detached from my own personal views. But at the same time, I have to say how I feel about things. And so, right away, there's something about the tone of her voice that doesn't sit well for me. And maybe this can help people that, really like her. Maybe this can help you understand what some people might be thinking who really don't like her or feel uncomfortable about her for some reason. There's that, but also her mannerisms when she's speaking, they don't seem authentic. And I feel like one of the reasons for that is because she's not being allowed to really express herself, but she's being forced to say what the party wants her to say. So we mentioned these people that come out of nowhere and support her. Some of those people are people in the Democratic Party who are really pulling the strings behind the scenes of the Democratic Party. And they chose her, but I feel like they chose her to be a figurehead for them, and they're directing her at what to say, how to act, what to do. So then what happens is she's becoming very stifled in her expression. She has to be very careful about the words. She has to constantly be thinking about what she's saying, because what she's talking about may not be coming natural to her, because these might not be her beliefs. She may feel like if she doesn't do what they say, that they're not going to support her anymore. She's not going to be part of the group anymore. She may feel like she can't go against what they want her to do. And I feel that's probably because her ideas are a little bit more radical than she's expressing them to be. And so when I say she has to toe the party line, is at least how she's presenting her ideas to the public have to be in this very kind of diplomatic way. Let me pull up another chart here that I ran for her, because I'm using asteroids. I use a lot of asteroids in my charts. And you can see, for instance, that the asteroid Soros is exactly conjunct her Mars, and also Donald is conjunct Mars. Now, Donald is not, in this case, I'm not using it to represent Donald Trump. I'm using it to represent her father, who's also named Donald, Donald Harris. And I feel like, there is influence from her father here, and there's a lot of, I feel, wounding from her relationship with her father. And then over here we have Hillary conjunct White House and opposing Jupiter here. And Hillary squares Soros. So, and that's just a small taste of people that could be influencing her behind the scenes. But you'll see that she has Truth, asteroid Truth, conjunct Karma in Sagittarius. Finding her truth is definitely here part of her lessons. Now, her father was an economist and he taught Marxist economics. And so, from her family, she has this socialist background, socialist influence. And socialism, I feel, puts the emphasis on the group, which often negates the rights of the individual. And I feel like this is an issue that shows up here in her chart because it appears that she has strong socialist leanings. And I think that a lot of times people that have socialist leanings and they want to focus on the group and equity and making everybody the same, they think that that's doing the right thing. But when you do that, you take away people's individuality and you take away their freedom to express themselves, which is what is going on for her. Like she's having this own inner struggle herself with her sun and the moon and her north and south node, and really like expressing herself and her own ideas. So that's why I think she comes across sometimes as inauthentic, is because she isn't being authentic. She isn't really expressing what she really feels or what she really wants to see or what her true, I'm going to use the word agenda is. Well, I don't want to make this a talk about the benefits of socialism versus capitalism. I'll save that for another day. But it'd be interesting to see how this plays out for her over time. With her North Node being in Gemini, I believe how her soul would like her to grow is by communicating with other people so that she can get an expanded vision. I feel like especially when it comes to like faith and spirituality, that her chart shows that is an inner journey for her and not something that she shares a lot with other people. But doing that would help her to understand other people's perspectives. Now, I was reading a bit about her, and her mother and father both immigrated to the United States. They both are from different backgrounds. Her mother is from India, her father is from Jamaica. Um, Different religious beliefs. I was reading because I had to look up like what is her religion because it's not clear. And all I could find was that it's her religion is Hinduism, but also American Baptist. And then she's married to a Jewish person. So it's kind of, for me, that really means she doesn't believe in anything because she's not being clear. Now, I'm sure some of you would want to argue with me about that and say, You can be many things, and it's true. I have learned and taken bits from different religious backgrounds and incorporated them into my spirituality. But I guess, like, from what I read, how I took that, and I could be wrong because I haven't heard it directly from her, is that she's not really wedded to one belief when it comes to spirituality, anyways. I think that's probably different on a political viewpoint. But maybe what I'm trying to get at is maybe that left her not really having a strong spiritual life. And that's part of the reason why that's all internalized. It goes with the Gemini energy, perhaps, of like a little bit of everything. Gemini can be a little bit of that saying, Jack of all trades, master of none. Is the focus can be on learning a little bit about everything, but not really mastering something. But she also did travel quite a bit, which is also aligned with that Sagittarian archetype of experiencing different cultures, different religions. But I'm not sure how much that plays a role in her life today. That may have been part of her life as a child, but what about today? I mean, certainly she's married to someone that is at a different background than her, which isn't surprising. I guess another thing here with the Gemini archetype is needing to test her ideas. And this also goes with her Jupiter. So the ruler of her south node is Jupiter, and it's in her 12th house. So like I was saying, this is an inner part of her that she doesn't show, like her faith, her spirituality. I feel like, she naturally has a strong spiritual inclination, but I'm not sure that she is aligned with that or paying attention to that. Like I said, it's not really clear. Maybe the people around her stifled that part. And when we have a planet in our 12th house, this is showing that there's some karma there. There's karma around beliefs. But also, she has a lot of planets squaring her nodes. She's got Chiron squaring her nodes and Uranus, Pluto, and Venus squaring her nodes. So there's a lot of unresolved energy from past lives. And this is going to play a focus. And I feel like maybe part of the reason why her life feels so faded or is so faded is because her soul is really wanting her to resolve these issues. So when we have these fixed belief systems, then we tend to have a very singular point of view. And if we don't stretch ourselves through the Gemini archetype, then we stay stuck in those beliefs. Okay? She's got this Gemini focus because she needs to see if her theories are really going to work in reality. Because when we just hold everything within, or, we don't ever challenge our beliefs, we take for granted that they're accurate, but they may not work. Let's take immigration, for instance. Now, maybe she has a belief that it's a human right that everyone should be able to come to America who wants to come to America, even if they're coming in illegally, because that's what America is founded on. And on paper, that sounds really good, right? But in practice, how is that working out? Because if we let millions of people in every year illegally and we don't know who's coming in, or we have to support these people who can't support themselves, this is putting large burdens on everybody else. So this could be an instance of, here's the belief, Now put it into practice and see if that really works in reality. And she hasn't really said that she doesn't see that it's not working. She's kind of continued to say that she wants open borders, or, they haven't really done anything to close the border. So we have to assume that that's her belief. So that's a way of testing it. One way we could kind of verbalize it is Sagittarius is like, this is what I believe, but Gemini's like, well, these are the facts, right? And do your beliefs hold up in the face of facts? So all these planets down here in the fourth house squaring her nodes are interesting because this is, fourth house has a lot to do with our family life. So I feel like her childhood is heavily influencing things. And I feel like her parents had a lot of control over her beliefs. And maybe they didn't really allow Kamala to think for herself, but kind of told her. Now, her parents were activists in the 60s, that they met being activists. So we can assume that her parents had very strong beliefs about how they thought things should be run politically, for example. Her father was an economist, so he probably had very strong beliefs about financial systems. Her mother was a medical researcher who did cancer research. So I'm sure her mother had very strong beliefs about science and medicine and disease. And so it's somewhat logical to conclude that a lot of her beliefs were put on her from her family, that they were very strongly influential. They might have even made her feel like her own ideas were invalid. Her parents divorced in 1972, so she was quite young when her father left. And it seems like her relationship with her father became distant. It does seem like they had contact and perhaps saw each other occasionally, but it seems from what I read that her mother was the one who raised her. And I think this had a strong influence on her, much stronger than she's speaking about, because these planets in the fourth house square the nodes suggest that her family life is not this happy life that she necessarily portrays. She does speak very highly of her mother. But we can love and respect our parents, but that doesn't mean that they didn't hurt us as children or that they provided for every single emotional need. And I feel like that's part of the issue here is her emotional needs weren't met. I feel like her father leaving was one way that her needs weren't met, but also her mom was a single mother. And as a researcher, she likely worked long hours. And so maybe Kamala was often with sitters or family that wasn't her mother. Maybe her mother wasn't there for her as much as she liked or would have liked. But having Pluto in the fourth house suggests that her emotional needs weren't met. She's also likely to have intense emotional imprints from other lifetimes as well. And I feel very strongly that Pluto and Uranus being square the nodal axis is telling us that there's a lot of past life pain that hasn't really been processed. I feel like her past life issue was that her beliefs in another lifetime weren't accepted. So she was likely persecuted for what she believed. And this can create subconscious doubt in the self. So even while we have strong beliefs, the doubt can come in regards to how are people going to accept that? How are people going to react to our beliefs? Oh, I better keep that secret because I don't know. People might reject me for it. So when we go through persecution, there's a lot of abandonment. Abandonment by society, which can also play into the fear that we're not going to belong, that the same thing's going to happen to us. The fourth house itself is often representative of our deeply ingrained patterns. So, with Pluto and Uranus in the fourth house, there's a need to transform these patterns. With Uranus in the fourth house, I feel that's representing a lack of nurturing, not feeling safe. Again, abandonment, persecution, feelings of inadequacy, not feeling ready to take responsibility. I don't mean that as in, not taking responsibility for one's actions, but I mean in order to self-actualize, she may not feel ready. There can be like this inner security, or I mean inner lack of security. And there can be, with Pluto Uranus here, some of this emotional wounding is likely to be transferred into other relationships. The fourth house is our home life. It's our private life, our private time, the things that we do behind the scenes. And she does have Venus here. So I'm not saying her family life was horrible. She did have love. She did have, her parents provided for her. But possibly due to the extent of the karma and past life work that she's dealing with and the emotional turmoil and stress from those other lifetimes, she may not have received what she needed. We all have a different level of what we need emotionally to feel supported. And that's a very subjective thing. Even siblings that come from the same family, and they might have two completely different descriptions of what their family and childhood was like because they needed different things. And so the parents might have met the needs of one child and not the needs of the other. And it doesn't mean that they were horrible parents, but they may not have been able to meet the level that was needed. And these are pretty strong signatures. So there's definitely something from the past that is almost like a void for her when it comes to that love and support that she's looking for. But I feel like her home is likely one of those safe places. And I feel that she's a bit reluctant to step out into the spotlight where she finds herself right now. I mean, she did run for president in 2020 before being chosen as the vice president. But sometimes we want something and we don't really know what that fully entails until we set out and try it. And so it begs the question, now that she finds herself there, thrust into the spotlight more than ever, is this going to be what she's really comfortable with? Or is she more of a person that is a behind the scenes person? Is she forcing herself to put herself in the spotlight? And there can be a bit of both. Certainly being president of the United States is the most stressful job probably in the world. And one has to be extremely confident in themselves. There can't be much leeway for questioning whether one has what it takes or not. Now, possibly this is the situation that was planned for her on her soul's journey to bring some of these things to her attention. So I think, part of her lesson here is taking responsibility for the emotions. Now, the thing with that is This is not a part that she's showing. So when I say that, it may not compute because I feel like this emotional part of herself is reserved for those closest to her. She may view her emotions as a weakness, and that's why she's very, she can come across as very unemotional. But I think that they're there. I think it's the emotional part that is making her feel conflicted in some areas right now because she really has to put herself out there. And it's like you're in a position as president or even the presidential nominee of constantly being judged, constantly being ridiculed. And so those insecurities can be exposed with that kind of pressure. I also feel like there's a lesson here for her to be learned about society in that sometimes what seems unfair is meant to be an experience that leads us to the truth of what true justice is. So if we have more of like socialist leanings and we want to be avengers of injustice and we want to make everyone equal and make every opportunity equitable. Again, on one hand, that seems noble, but it's not taking into account the soul energy of the soul wants to be challenged. The soul wants to experience these things because it's in the challenge of overcoming some hardship or some unfairness that we learn about our own power. Her Chiron is in the fourth, or not the fourth, the 10th house as well. Chiron is the soul wound. Okay? I feel like Kamala, like, her soul is a healer on some level. There's a lot of ways that the word healer can be embodied. I'm not sure she's embodying that right now. She might in the future, I don't know. But I feel like that's her calling. Again, if where we're at is not aligned with what our soul intended for us, then that can cause issues in security and confidence and our authenticity. One thing I was thinking about as I was reading about her childhood was that her parents took her as an infant on protests with them. And I was thinking like that's interesting because when you're at a protest, there's a lot of people, it's crowded, it's noisy, people might be chanting, there can be police presence there. Like what would that feel like to be an infant about 1 years old or a year and a half and be in that situation? It might feel very unsafe to a child, and so maybe that's something that's reflected here in her chart. But this Gemini archetype that she's trying to embody is trying to help her be a better communicator. She also has Mars in the third house of Gemini. And so, one of the things I feel is the problem in her communication is that perhaps she can be very blunt. She may not be a very nuanced communicator. You know, some people, they just have a gift of being like very descriptive and they can really paint a picture. But with Mars kind of being like involved in your communication is just like, you know, very blunt, very direct, argumentative, perhaps at times, competitive, fear of failure, opinionated for sure. Her Mars is opposing Saturn, again in the third and ninth house, that Gemini Sagittarius archetype. And so there's some kind of, like when Mars and Saturn are aspecting each other, there's not a good flow because Mars has a hard time getting going because Saturn's always restraining. even within the communication that maybe is a bit argumentative, there can be a lot of restraint. With Saturn in the ninth house, again, this echoes that finding her own truth and espousing that truth. Saturn's also in the sign of Aquarius. I feel like that's representing again, her ideas are different than other people's ideas and likely to be much more radical than she shares. And that's likely to be part of the problem in another lifetime, was that authority figures, they did not accept her ideas. But yeah, with Chiron in the 10th house, to go back to that, sorry, I got distracted. Um, yeah, I'm not sure she's super comfortable being out there in the spotlight. We haven't really talked much about Mercury, who is her chart ruler and also the ruler of her north node. Her Mercury is in Scorpio. So again, Mercury, we're talking about communication. And it's in Scorpio, but it's in the 5th house of Leo. So again, I think she has natural creativity when it comes to communication. Although, with the Leo energy, there can be a bit of acting involved, or maybe impersonating, maybe going overboard when it comes to communication. And maybe that's, something that subconsciously comes across to people, is she's being a little bit too much, a little going over the top. And I think with the Scorpio energy, Mercury in Scorpio, well, I mean, it can be like she can be a good detective. Someone with Mercury in Scorpio, they will get to the bottom of things. They want to get the facts. Good for a lawyer or someone in law enforcement, I think. It can be very analytical about other people, even judging other people. But there's also a part that's like, again, holding back. Scorpio doesn't like to disclose things. Scorpio is secretive. So very much interested in everybody else, but maybe not so much interested or talking about the self. So a couple interesting things about asteroids. Kamala has the asteroid Yeshua conjunct her sun, again on the same degree, 27 degrees. So Yeshua, by the way, is Jesus' true name. Jesus is the Greek pronunciation. So she's got Jesus on the sun, and on the moon she has Lucifer. So they're in this opposition. And when I saw that, I kind of got this feeling of like, like an angel on one shoulder, a devil on the other. And I feel like this is signifying for her that she has a choice here, whether she's going to choose the light or the dark. And I think part of that choice is following the sun or following the moon. If she's following her sun, then she's following her soul lessons. And she's going into her truth, and she's expressing her truth. And she's not caring about what other people think about her truth. But that, whether or not you agree with what her truth is, if she's honestly expressing it, then she's giving other people the opportunity to make a judgment on who she truly is, and not a role that she's trying to perform or hiding something. Again, like Mercury and Scorpio can be hiding things. It's also not letting other people control her or tell her what to say. Where if she goes with her moon, which is more of like the shadow self, the going for power, going for greed. In order for her to do that, then I think that she's going to not be fully open. When we talk about truth, it's not just truth about who she is, but really like being on the up and up with everything, not hiding things. If she goes with the moon energy and Lucifer, then there's elements that she's hiding, not just in her personality, but about the things that are happening behind the scenes. Who she's really talking to, who's really pulling the strings. What is the true agenda? Some of those people that I mentioned at the beginning that could be influencing her, I feel like they definitely pull more towards this darker energy of power and greed. She also has the asteroid Karl Marx here. Karl Marx is opposing her Venus. It's also like in her 10th house. So, that might be part of her public life. It's not really clear at this point, what her exact philosophies on all of that are. And certainly people's philosophies can change. It was an interesting conversation that she had in the interview the other day because she said, my beliefs haven't changed, which I thought was interesting in light of what we're talking about here. But we don't even really know clearly what those beliefs are because some of those she's not being open and honest with and she's holding them close to her chest. But yeah, we'll see how things evolve. It's interesting because the Sabian symbol for her son is a man alone in deep gloom, unnoticed. Angels are coming to his aid. Well, that's the degree of her Yeshua. So it's like the light is there, but she may not be acknowledging it or notice that it's there. Lucifer is on a duck pond and its young brood. So ducks a lot of times live in groups, and this is in her 11th house of groups. This can be strongly influenced by family because it's talking about a young brood. I'm going to read some of the cautionary keywords from the book. Denying your needs for others in the brood, narrow-minded attitudes, not inviting others in, feeling stuck, feeling left out and alone, smugness and exclusivity, all looking the same and no one standing out as individuals, distrusting those who are alien, borders erected to keep out foreigners. That's kind of interesting. Her moon is on the Sabian symbol, a large disappointed audience. Again, it's in her 11th house. We're talking about groups. And so not feeling accepted by the group or feeling like you're a disappointment. This can play into those insecurities that, or maybe we could say vulnerabilities that I think are there when she's speaking. Her Pluto is on the Sabian symbol, delighted children crowd around the orangutan cage in a zoo. This is interesting because we talked a little bit in regards to her 4th house energy, how she might not like being in the public eye. And so that might make her feel caged in or feeling trapped, feeling like an animal stuck in a cage at times by having to be so public. Feeling like one is in a zoo, having no place for privacy, building cages, fences and barriers, the intrusion of the media. All very interesting kind of key words there. The Sabian symbol for her north node and her ascendant are a gardener trimming large palm trees. So I feel like this is representing like she needs to get rid of the dead weight. She needs to get rid of old things. This is what her soul is telling her. Cut the past away. Some of the key words are trimming off non-essentials, getting rid of rubbish, editing words, thoughts, emotions, weeding out the unnecessary, neglecting the real issues at hand, not knowing when to stop. All right, I think I'll end it there. If you are interested in a personal astrology reading, I will link my website below. Hope this gave you some insight. Thank you so much for watching and looking forward to connecting again soon.